While connected technology is essential for unlocking new efficiencies on the production floor, it's also presented hackers with new opportunities to steal valuable IP and data. To support OT professionals in their battle with cyber criminals, we launched the Security Breach podcast. In each of our over 100 episodes, we've brought in cybersecurity specialists to provide valuable insights and break down critical topics. As a go-to podcast for our listeners, we want to help you align your brand with our expertise. By sponsoring our podcast, your brand will build trust, and your message will stand out to an audience searching for tools to assist their cybersecurity efforts. Secure your share in this rapidly growing segment by sponsoring Security Breach. Contact us today to learn more. Hi, I'm Jeff Ranke, Editorial Director of Manufacturing.net and Manufacturing Business Technology. Welcome to Security Breach. You know, some of our best episodes have centered around a topic like we have today, which is breaking down a really unique hack. Now, I say best for two reasons. First, let's be honest. Everyone likes to know how someone else might have screwed up and what the fallout looks like. So to be honest, the downloads, plays, etc., all that stuff definitely spikes, which admittedly is good for business. But more importantly, breaking down these hacks leads to more in-depth conversations about new tactics and strategies that are being deployed by the bad guys, and simultaneously provides insight on developing best practices for the good guys. So, while I enjoyed diving into how the ransomware group Akira was able to use webcam access to infiltrate an organization, it was also great to discuss the evolution of these hacking groups, EDR tools, dark web monitoring, and the need for better credential security with Steve RaaS. He's the Director of Cybersecurity at SRM, a leading provider of cyber intelligence and solutions. Well, hey, Steve, thanks so much for the time and welcome to Security Breach.
Thanks for having me, Jeff. Wonderful to be here.
Excellent. You know, we're going to get into a very specific situation you guys encountered. But before we do that, I thought we could just kind of kick off talking about how great IoT is. And we love all of these new connections and devices and everything else that we're able to do. In the process, we're expanding the attack surface. From your perspective, what are you seeing in terms of some of the vulnerabilities that are popping up most frequently or just happen most common that the industrial sector is having to deal with right now?
Yeah, certainly. Well, if we talk about the most common, in that case, it always comes back to sort of your typical, any industry, really. So that's multi-factor authentication from the identity perspective, making sure that who enters your network is who you want to enter. Yeah. Having good endpoint detection and response is another thing we're seeing people kind of get around lower quality tools. And then patch and vulnerability management is absolutely crucial. But to your point, where one of the challenges comes in is where we're seeing with IoT increasing in the sheer number of devices, that patch and vulnerability management piece gets a lot more challenging for organizations.
Yeah, that patching, that is a tough one because we're talking about downtime for manufacturing, which is just an absolute killer. I know we could spend the whole time talking about patching strategies, but just off the top, what are some of the things that you've seen people do that have been successful in sort of managing the patching dynamic and dealing with some of these increased vulnerability numbers?
Yeah, I think, with patching and vulnerability, it's almost like a hygiene issue. It's got to be consistent. It's got to be happening regularly. Some of the challenges that we see with folks is they maybe don't have the head count or they don't have the capacity to really apply all those vulnerability fixes and patches that they need to. So I would say that's an area where we see some challenges for not just manufacturing, but other industries as well.
Absolutely. So you guys did have a very interesting situation lately that popped up dealing with Akira and a webcam. We're going to dig into that. Before we do, I was hoping maybe you could fill us in a little bit on Akira itself. This is a hacking group we've heard a lot about. They're notorious in terms of ransomware and some other things for the industrial sector, but maybe you can fill us in a little bit more about who these folks are and what their usual targets are.
Yeah, absolutely. So Akira is one of the most prolific threat actor groups out there. They've been a part of some very major breaches. They tend to come up a lot whenever we see large organizations get targeted. So we first observed Akira in March 2023. They are a ransomware as a service group. We think fairly confidently that they are based in Russia and other former Soviet Union countries. So kind of gives you an understanding of who they are, maybe some of their motivations. Our cyber threat intelligence team, which is amazing, they believe that there's some connections between Akira and an infamous ransomware group known as Conti as well. So again, financially motivated. They're going to look to gain initial access within your environment. From there, they're going to try to not just lock up your systems, but they're also going to exfiltrate data, which we call double extortion. So it's another big thing of theirs. They tend to be somewhat honorable when it comes to threat actor negotiation. They will follow through on providing decryptors, not reattacking, at least to the extent of our knowledge. And their decryptors have generally worked. But, of course, you would have to pay for that to happen. And what does your business interruption look like before that? That's, probably a bigger question for most folks.
Yeah. It's interesting that they have this affiliation with Conti. I mean, we're seeing more and more of this for these high-profile hacking groups working together. Does one have a different specialty that they sort of offer? Is Akira more of the initial access or the malware, or how are they working together, I guess?
There's so many disparate individuals within each of these orgs. It would be really hard to kind of say, oh, this one is more specialized in this. There certainly are some of those ransomware gangs and threat actor groups that are a little bit more focused on one avenue or the other. But I think in this case, the relation to Conti is more about kind of the fragmentation in the threat actor landscape. So to give you a little bit more info on that, basically, what we saw from 2023 to 2024 to now was a fragmentation of this threat actor landscape, where we saw somewhere around 25-30 individual threat actor groups in 2022 to now, seeing that jump up 96% in 2023. So, all that means is there's more competition out there among the bad guys too. And so, organizations are going to continue to be targeted at high volumes.
Yeah, it's that whole Hydra thing, right? You cut one head off like Lockbit and a bunch more spring up. So
well said, Jeff. Yeah, and I think you're a military veteran. I know I'm a veteran of the United States Marine Corps. So one of the things we see it kind of parallel is some of these post 9/11 terror groups where, like you said, cut the head off and the body just reforms as another group somewhere else.
Yeah, makes it definitely keeps it challenging. There's just this constant evolution with the bad guys here that we need to stay on top of. So I know there's a lot of this we can't really disclose. I know there hasn't been a lot of public information about the victim itself. Can you tell us anything sort of on the periphery in terms of manufacturer sector, anything like that? Or are we really kind of staying away from that right now?
Yeah, I definitely cannot name the impacted party. That's something that I can't go into for legal reasons. But I'm happy to go into, some of the details that our team witnessed during the event, some of the response efforts, anything like that. I think I can even pull up the device that was impacted.
Wow. Well, one of the things that was interesting about this is the EDR tool that they had in place, the Endpoint Detection and Response tool, was effective, right? It did work in shutting down some of the initial probes from Akira. Maybe you can talk to us a little bit about that. Before we get into the bad stuff, let's talk about something that was good here. What worked, I guess? What was what did they put in place that was so effective?
Yeah, so that's a great call out there because, oftentimes we say, hey, we want to see our clients with this top tier EDR tool. And here we had a threat actor trying to bypass it. So really good call out by you. So basically what happened was the Akira team is trying to hack into the impacted party. They are getting their ransomware binary kill and quarantined by the EDR solution. So instead of being able to execute their malware, it's getting killed. It's getting killed. So they think, hey, let's find a way to circumvent this. And it can be very difficult to deploy certain EDR tools to kind of non-standardized technologies such as this webcam. So the threat actor gets really creative, do a little bit of network scanning, understanding where there might be a vulnerability, and poof, they find this camera. From there, really being clear here, they only pivoted to that camera when they could not get in any other way. So, we try to tell the client, well, you're doing a really good job, but you still had this happen. Exactly. So to give you an idea of the kind of the unorthodox attack chain here. So They did gain access to the corporate network via remote access solution. That's a pretty commonly exploited set of tools that threat actors will use. They deployed AnyDesk from there. That's another thing we see fairly common across some of these exploits and these compromises. They used remote desktop protocol then to move laterally, expand their presence within the system, and then eventually they're able to drop their zip file onto the system, and there it goes.
Just proliferated from there. So when we look at this, basically they were shut down where they wanted to go, and they just kept probing and probing and probing till they finally found a weak spot. Does this come down to an asset inventory thing? Is this a lack of segmentation? Is it a little bit of both, or was this just the bad guys doing a better job than the good guys?
Yeah, I think you hit on a couple key things. First, I'll say I think this is indicative of the innovation that's happening at the threat actor level. Okay, I mentioned kind of fragmentation across the space. That means competition is high. These guys all want to, buy Christmas presents for their family at the end of the year. They want to take vacations. A lot of these ransomware gangs are structured like corporations. So, so certainly they are looking for any way to gain an upper hand. And in this case, it's technologies that maybe 10 years ago, 15 years ago, we weren't worried about being breached. But as these techniques and tactics and procedures evolve, that's where you see some of these new methods. So I don't like to say, it's definitely bad network segmentation, although that would probably have helped. I don't like to say it's bad patch and vuln management, although that would have helped. It's really a confluence of a few things. And if you're a cybersecurity leader, wearing the lens or wearing the hat, looking through the lens of the threat actor, understanding what they're willing to do to compromise your systems can really go a long way to helping you, block and defend those things.
Yeah. So you mentioned a couple times about the competitive dynamic that's now in place amongst these hacking groups. Do you think that led to or really fueled their persistence? I mean, they had to work pretty hard to get in here. Was it just a big target? Was it just stubbornness? Is it all these factors, I guess, sort of coming to a head?
Yeah, it's most of these ransomware groups have kind of multiple ongoing campaigns at a time. So they might spend a little bit of time trying to breach XYZ Corp. And then, not having much success today. I'll come back to that one tomorrow. I'm going to go over to ABC packaging or whatever. So, there often are a lot of efforts in flight. And sometimes we've seen some of these groups have persistence within a system for months and years. So it can take a long time before they actually finally kind of execute their strategy.
Well, I just want to get up on my soapbox a little bit. This just reinforces the fact that nobody can use that claim that we're not important enough, we're too small, any of those things. If they want to get in, I mean, they got in through a webcam here. It's pretty incredible. And I think it really reinforces the need for that, and hopefully also helps sell the need up the food chain a little bit for we need the resources, people, investment, all those things for industrial cybersecurity.
Right. Yeah, absolutely. And in particular, knowing the kind of the topic of this podcast, certainly we saw the manufacturing industry targeted more specifically over the last few years than any years prior. So, you look at some of those unique technologies that are deployed within the manufacturing and industrial sectors, and that's where I think some of that innovation is happening on the bad guy side. So we need to innovate too then.
No, great point. So what did we take away from this? What was the things that we learned? Obviously, we got to secure our webcams, but there's a bigger picture takeaway here as well. What would you say that is?
Yeah, I think it's about building defense in depth, never resting on your laurels, not sticking your head in the sand as a cybersecurity leader. I kind of alluded to this earlier, but if you're not willing to look through the lens of the threat actor and really envision what kind of damage you could do to your organization, whether it's business interruption or data exfil, what have you, like that's where you're going to run into problems, right? Think like the hacker, understand where your crown jewels are, where does that data reside, and then protect those systems the way that you're supposed to. Oftentimes it's a lot of the basics that folks fail at that these gangs are able to take advantage of.
Absolutely. Continuing with, borrowing some from our military backgrounds here, it's knowing all your avenues of approach and blocking and tackling in a lot of cases. So absolutely.
Yeah, you're
So,
speaking my language now. Yeah.
absolutely. So, talk to us a little bit about SRM here, Steve. What are some of the things that the company is doing, especially for our audience here in the industrial sector?
Yeah. So I think number one, we've got an excellent cyber threat intelligence function. So one of the things that we're doing, being that we really started out as a corporate intelligence firm, we wanted to take a lot of those kind of Ministry of Defense, former DoD, former three-letter agency folks, and really point that intellect and that drive at how can we help resolve some of these situations? How can we inform our clients, better prepare them for what's coming down the pipe in terms of cyber incidents? So that's one big thing, is just being aware, right? You mentioned knowing what your threat vectors are, right? What your avenues of approach are. If you don't know where the bad guys can get in, how are you going to start defending? So I think that's one of the big things we do for folks, but we're also on the reactive side, right? So we can, should something happen for, large organization all the way down to an SMB, don't know what to do, not sure if you have capacity to respond, we can step in and help make sure, contain what's going on, get the threat actor out of your systems, understand, okay, what do we need to do now to get your business back up and running? So that's what we can do in terms of response efforts. And so, of course, anything you can do proactively to prevent that from happening. Incident response plans, exercises, things of that nature.
Absolutely. I'd be curious to know your take here too. I think things have changed a great deal, particularly maybe in the last 5 years in the industrial sector, in terms of people's attitudes and responsiveness and embracing the need for cybersecurity. But when you come into an organization, what is that initial response when you start telling folks, hey, you got to do this. You got to pay attention to all of these different things. It's got to be very intimidating for them. So how do you sort of manage that process in turning them on to all these things without scaring them?
Yeah, I think it's first being empathetic to where in the journey everyone is when you're encountering them. I'm not going to expect some small time distillery to have the same type of protections and securities in place as, a large scale global manufacturing firm, right? So I think it's understanding what the art of the possible is for them. And, any good consultant will tell you, and I think this is maybe one of the consultant cliches, you don't want to just come in and tell someone their baby's ugly, right? So that's kind of the cliche we use. And I think that extends here. Someone's security program may not be at the highest level of maturity, but the fact that you're there having a conversation with them says that there's some concern, says that there's some interest in becoming more mature, becoming more robust from a cyber perspective. So anytime someone's brought us in, I welcome that conversation. Let's talk about how we can make you more secure. I think if we come into it from an adversarial perspective, nobody's going to get the benefit.
Well, and continuing with the ugly baby analogy and the adversarial dynamic here, in the manufacturing sector, we've got a lot of silos. When we've got the IT and we've got OT, and sometimes they're working together. It's gotten better, but there's still a lot of divisiveness there in terms of them maybe calling those two saying the other baby is ugly or something like that when you start getting into these conversations. What have you experienced there? Is it getting better? Are you still dealing with some of those turf battles or what's the dynamic?
Yeah, I think we're seeing improvement on that. I don't know if the turf battle will ever fully go away when we talk about engineers on the line versus the IT guys. But what we are seeing is, and maybe this is a little bit more of a concern, is some failures at air gapping now, right? So as these devices get more and more prolific, you might have the front of house IT guy on a tablet, and then is he going to use that same tablet to log into the OT environment to make some changes, right? So that's one of our primary concerns, is just that the interconnectedness of everything is leading to less air gapping, less control over kind of intermingling of those networks. But I think overall the awareness across the industry is much higher. So I think that's where we're seeing more buy-in and more commitment to securing these organizations.
Well, it's positive to hear that there's movement there. We're getting better. I think you're right. We're never going to have a complete, kumbaya type moment with those two, but at least we're getting them talking to each other more than they have in the past, which is positive. Right. So, Steve, this has been great. I love digging into this hack a little bit, but I'd like to get your take on some bigger picture sort of trends and issues that we're talking about in cybersecurity. the one we just can't avoid. Everybody wants to discuss artificial intelligence. So we know the bad guys have been using it for a while. The good guys are getting better at using it. What's your take, I guess, in terms of the state of AI in cybersecurity right now?
We'll be back after a quick break.
If you spend way too much time online, first of all, same. And second, you need promo guy talk pills. I'm Rawal, and with Alex, we break down everything happening in tech, digital marketing, and the internet's latest chaos. No boring corporate talk, just real discussions with real opinions. So go on, press play. You know you want to.
Yeah, wow, this is a dynamic question, huh? I mean, I think something like 90% of CEOs. I saw an article, so maybe don't quote me on this, but something like 90% of CEOs are saying they want to roll out AI, and under 50% have an idea of how they want to do that. So I think what I'm saying right now is I'm just encouraging caution across the board, right? I think if you don't have a good understanding, this is, obviously for internally, if you don't have a good understanding of where your crown jewels are, what systems you need to protect, network segmentation, I think rolling out Gen AI can be a really risky approach. Now, having said that, I know that there's also some business drivers for that. So people are going to be really interested in that, but I'm just encouraging an abundance of caution. Where I do see AI coming into play from a security perspective almost immediately is on some of these EDR tools. They've got they've got some machine learning capabilities. There's some user behavioral analytics type stuff that's starting to hit the scene too. So I think, there's the boogeyman of AI down the road for the threat actors, but the good guys are starting to incorporate it too. So, it's not all doom and gloom. But in terms of the threat actors, though, this is where things are going to get a little interesting and where we'll see some changes in the industry. So, there's some tooling out there. It's sort of like a jailbroken ChatGPT type thing, chat bots that'll build malware for you. It'll code malware. It will instruct you on how to write a phishing email, a spear phishing email, and it'll help you understand how to deploy and execute those malwares. So, gone are the days of seeing the phishing email that comes through and there's typos and, sort of the prince who needs all this money type of stuff. That's not going to work anymore on the astute observers of today. But the challenge now is you're not going to notice when that email or that link doesn't line up correctly. And so, security awareness training becomes an even bigger priority now too. So, there's some definite challenges out there for AI, but I'm confident that as much as the bad guys are innovating, the good guys are too.
No, I think that's great perspective, and I agree 100%. I think there was this rush. ChatGPT all of a sudden just brought AI into everybody's vocabulary, and they were in such a rush to do something with it that I think there's a lot of bad investment, and I think that's starting to settle down, which is a very positive thing. People understand how AI best fits their organization, not just from an operational perspective, but from a cybersecurity one as well, which is positive movement as well. So,
that's right.
Another area I wanted to get into, we talked a little bit about the bad guys evolving, getting smarter, more complex. I worry a lot about these state-sponsored actors because they're targeting a lot of industrial control systems used in utilities. Well, these industrial control systems are also used in, airplane factories and places that make cars and computers and everything else. The control systems are very, very similar, and they're essentially creating a blueprint. What are some of the things that you're seeing on the state-sponsored level that are both concerning or maybe that you're developing solutions for as well?
First thought is we all kind of remember that colonial pipeline situation, right? And I'm not even sure that that hacking group was aware of kind of what they'd stumbled upon when they had it. So I think that set a little bit of the tone moving forward, where we had that group essentially go, oh, we didn't mean to do this, and kind of, try to get out of there without getting too much focus on them. I think many nation states, likely including our own, have the capabilities of accessing infrastructure in other nation states. I think what we need to do is continue to try to shut those down where we can and continue getting strong security postures where we can, because those advanced persistent threats are incredibly difficult for standard commercial organizations to defend against.
Absolutely. This is another topic that's coming up more and more for manufacturers, and I'll apologize if this is getting sort of a little bit out of your area of expertise, but I'll throw it at you anyway.
Sure, let's try it.
When we look at financial institutions and medical organizations, credential harvesting was such a big thing there, and a lot of that takes place on the dark web. And there's been a lot of dark web monitoring going on by these other industries for quite a while. Manufacturing is starting to realize we need to get in there too. People want our login information, and it's just as valuable as a lot of these other places that we haven't thought about before. What advice could you give to industrial enterprises that don't really know where to start when it comes to some of this dark web monitoring, what they need to do, and how important it's going to continue to become?
Yeah, well, it starts with awareness, because the only way these creds get out there is by somebody getting breached, right? So Number one, having awareness of where you're putting your creds. Don't click a link and then enter your password for your work laptop, right? So joking aside, though, I mean, realistically, you mentioned financial services and some of that cred harvesting. That's the same technique that's going to apply across really any industry. So if it happened to financial services, and then it happened to healthcare, and then it happened to schools, like, you better believe it's going to happen to manufacturing next. So what I would encourage on that is multi-factor authentication. Like, it's such a basic thing that you can, now across almost anything, you can have MFA enabled. So I'd like to see that coverage of MFA more consistently across organizations. Beyond that, VPN usage, privilege access management, some of the more basic controls, but things to just really prevent your folks from giving out those creds or user databases internally from being hacked. But it's largely going to be the same techniques. So there's a lot to leverage in terms of educational information that's already out there, frankly.
Yeah. It's crazy how we keep coming back to, and you're not the first to offer up sort of the blocking and tackling again, the basic approaches that can really be so effective. Double factor authentication and just being careful in your credentials and what you're sharing. It seems so basic, but yet continues to be so important. It's good to reinforce those things, I guess is what I'm saying too.
Yeah, absolutely. And it shouldn't be something, I hope the manufacturing industry doesn't perceive this as a one-time check the box. This needs to be something that happens consistently, right? So we need to see teams training year after year. We need to see teams running incident response exercises. Have an exercise where you shut a plant down, or at least, hypothetically shut a plant down and see how that goes, right? These things can all lead to really good insights for an organization on what they would do should that situation arise.
No, absolutely. Steve, are there any other big trends that you're seeing right now that could really have an impact in maybe the near future?
Well, we talked about fragmentation of the space, right? 96% increase in threat actors obviously just means there's more of them out there. There's a higher chance that you're going to get hit just from the numbers. So obviously, we're encouraging folks to be aware of that. In particular, the three industries that we saw the largest year-over-year growth for being targeted by ransomware was construction, hospitals and healthcare, and manufacturing. So 2 out of those 3 really applicable for what we're talking about here. Yeah. And so we would want to encourage organizations that are in those spaces to really start thinking about what's your risk appetite for a cyber event. Are you okay with having one? Fine. Go ahead and not invest in those controls. But if not, it's time to start securing your systems. And then I think one of the things I'll kind of leave you with this one here as far as stats and kind of key takeaways. We are seeing payments decline, right? So in 2024, 14% of the cases that we worked resulted in a ransom payment. But in 2023, that was 28%. So I think what that indicates to folks out there is that we are doing a good job on the security. We just need to continue doing so because the bad guys are not going to stop innovating. So, a little silver lining there, if you will.
Yeah, there's no finish line. I mean, it's a constant race and a constant battle without a doubt. Steve, the one I like to ask this question to a lot of people who are dealing with these things, some of the bad things, some of the more difficult challenges on a day-to-day basis. You're studying these threat actors. You're seeing the landscape expand. How do you sleep at night? What are the things that sort of give you some peace of mind at the end of the day that we're going to get there and we will be okay?
Well, I live totally off the grid. No, I'm just kidding. I think it's just exhaustion at the end of the night from tackling a lot of these throughout the day.
Yeah.
No, I mean, joking aside, it can be scary to kind of wade into this field. But just remembering that, the people that you're working with are trying, they're doing their best. They're trying their best, right? The organizations that we bring in as partners, or that we, if you bring in an organization like mine, we're there to help you protect and defend your customers, your data. So I think just coming into these types of exercises, these types of initiatives with a mindset of everybody wants to improve, and not taking any sort of improvement actions as a personal attack on maybe your department, or, you fail a phishing test, like that's not a personal attack. That's an area for you to improve. So I think we're seeing that kind of culturally shift across the industry, but, certainly more people buying in, committing to securing their systems. We could see, pretty big disruption in the ransomware landscape if everybody played along.
No, I agree 100%. Steve, great stuff. Really appreciate your insight and sharing a lot of that information about Akira and that webcam attack. Yeah, wonderful stuff. Really appreciate the time, man.
Thanks, Jeff. Really appreciated being on here and talking with you.
Thanks for the time today, Steve, and thanks to all of you for joining us. To catch up on past episodes, you can go to manufacturing.net, IEN.com, or mbtmag.com. You can also check Security Breach out wherever you get your podcasts, including Apple, Amazon, and Overcast. And if you have a cybersecurity story or topic that you'd like to have us explore in Security Breach, you can reach me at jeff@ien.com. For Steve Ross, I'm Jeff Ranke, and this is Security Breach.